All right, so let's look at the first advanced linear game in the big advanced linear set. This guy Ron just had his lunch. He has seven pieces of, uh, seven objects. Uh, a mug and a plate, which are both pieces of china. He has two pieces of glassware, water glass, juice glass, and he has three utensils, a fork, knife, and spoon. And what we want to know is what order he's going to wash these things in. But before we go to the rules, there's this really important couple of sentences towards the end of the scenario. It says Ron washed two pieces of china consecutively, and the two glasses consecutively, and the three utensils consecutively. In other words, we don't know the order that the pieces of china are going to go in, but we know that it's either going to be MP or PM. And the same thing for glasses. We don't know the order, but we know that they're going to be back to back, and the same thing for utensils. That makes the game a lot easier because as soon as you figure something else, as soon as you figure something out about uh, one of the pieces in a group, for example, one of the utensils or one of the pieces of china, then you automatically know something about where the other pieces in that group are going to go. All right, so each of these kinds of objects has to be adjacent to the other objects of its kind. So let's go to the rules. Ron washed each of the objects exactly once. That's good. That's another thing that makes our life easier. This is one-to-one game. Ron washed the glassware after either the china or the utensils, but not after both. So let's just break this up into two pieces. Ron washed the glassware after either the china or the utensils. Stop there. So we know that he didn't wash the glassware first because it had to come after either the china or the utensils. But then he says, but then the rule says, but not after both, which means that he also could not have washed the glassware last, right? Because if he did wash it last, then it would be coming after both. So what do we know? We know that the glassware is going to go in the middle. Okay, so let's draw our, and that should help us a lot. Let's draw our spaces out here. All right, one, and then we can, give me a second while I just draw out the spaces. We have seven of them, right? And what we want to know is who's going to go in which of these spaces. What we just talked about, the fact that we know now is that the glassware is going to go in the middle. So either it's going to go china, glassware, utensils, or it's going to go utensils, glassware, china. And right away, what might you be thinking? Templates, right? We'd be thinking, all right, well, the glassware is going to go in the middle. So one thing we could do is make this the utensils here. Okay, we can make this FKS. And in that case, sorry, that would actually be extending over these three. And then on these two, we would have glassware, like usual, which would be W or J. And then over here would be the china, which is going to be M and P. Okay, now let's just make another one so we can draw the other possibility. All right, really quickly. And the other possibility, think about what that's going to be for 1 second. I'm sure you guys already all know that would be where we put the china first. Okay, sorry, not JP, MP. Put the china first, and the glassware, as we already figured out, would always have to be second. And then last over here, I should draw a line, we want an arc. Okay, need a little more arc on my arc. So last over here would be the utensils, which is FKS. All right, and these templates stem from what we just read about the fact that the glassware had to be after the china or the utensils, but not after both. In other words, the glassware had to be the middle set of objects that were washed. We have two more rules though. He washed the knife before the spoon, and he washed the mug before the plate. Okay, so let's write our rules over here, and we can put them in a rule box. And we'll say, first we'll just say these are the rules, so we don't get confused. And so let's write the rule they just said. Think about really quickly how you're going to write it. He washed the knife before the spoon, so the knife comes before the spoon, and also he washed the mug before the plate. All right, so these are our first two rules. And actually, let me number them so that we can refer to them in our discussion. And I'm going to number them 1 and 2, even though there were rules before these two rules, those rules we were able to put directly onto our diagram, so I'm not going to number those rules, and we'll just start with K before S as rule number 1. And then finally, the last rule is he did not wash any two objects at the same time. So this last rule, you may think that you didn't need to know that, or you may have already assumed that, but it just goes to show you that you don't really want to make any assumptions, because up until now, they didn't tell us that there couldn't be ties. So when I drew out my 7 spots, I was kind of assuming that there wouldn't be any ties, but I actually kind of jumped the gun on that. We didn't know that until now. And what I mean by that is, we could have washed these 7 objects uh, basically in like 6 time slots if he was able to wash 2 of these things simultaneously. And so what the last rule is telling us is that we don't have to worry about that. In other words, that the setup we drew is appropriate. Okay, so just be careful on that point. Don't make assumptions like I just did there. All right, so let's figure out how these 2 rules over here, let's figure out how these 2 rules over here that we put in the rule box, how they affect what's going on in the templates. K before S. So that means that, well, that tells us something about the ordering in between the utensils, right? So it tells us that, for example, over here, the K is going to come before the S, and over here, the K is going to come before the S. But it doesn't help us, figure out, like, I guess we could do something like this. We could say that, okay, so if K is going to come before the S, then in this template, we know for sure that this cannot be K, and we know for sure that this cannot be S, right? And that's because the K would have to come before the S. And then in this template, we know for sure, again, same deal, that this cannot be K, and we know for sure that this cannot be S, all right? And I'm not going to draw lines through places where variables can't go. I'm just going to put them underneath the diagram, and if they're underneath this particular spot, that means they can't go there. So what about the second rule, M before P? That is, M and P are both pieces of china. So when they tell us M before P, there's only 2 pieces of china. So wherever we were going to put the pieces of china, we can actually now put them in order, M, P, because there aren't any other pieces. So with this rule, we now know automatically the order of the pieces of china. We know that, okay, if this is where the 2 pieces of china are going to go, and M is going to be before P, then M is going to have to go there, and P is going to have to go here. And likewise, in this template, the M would have to go in spot 6, and the P would have to go in spot 7. Okay? So that actually helps us quite a bit, because we now know the order of M and P in both of the templates. Actually, I'm going to just really quickly, I just wanted to quickly move the second template down. All right, so this is our setup. All right, we can draw a box around this to try to keep it neat, and this is our setup. So let's figure out now if there's anything else that we can do. Otherwise, we'll go to the questions. But I think that this will be good enough, because when we look at the questions, all right, it looks like for each of the questions, it's either going to ask us what can be true, in which case we can check our templates, or they're going to give us some extra information, like in 11 and 12, which will trigger some action that we can then rely upon to get us an answer. In other words, we don't need to solve this whole thing up front, because there are not a lot of must-be-true questions, global must-be-true questions, which just ask us to answer questions directly based on our template here, or based on our pre-game analysis, based on our setup. All right, so let's stop there for a second, and then on the next video, we'll actually go to the questions. All right.